What if I told you that the last 10, 20, maybe even 60 minutes you just spent scrolling, that endless cascade of videos, that sudden laugh, that shared meme, wasn't really your choice? What if I told you that your thumb, swiping almost of its own accord, is playing a part in a story you don't even know you're in? We think of it as just an app, a time waster, a silly little platform for dance challenges and lip syncs. But what if it's not? What if TikTok is less of a toy and more of a key? A key that has unlocked a new kind of human interaction, a new kind of fame, a new kind of economy, and maybe, just maybe, a new kind of control. We've all heard the myths that it's just for kids, that it's a flash in the pan, that it's just another social media app in a sea of social media apps. But the truth is so much bigger, so much more complex, and frankly, so much more interesting. The story of TikTok isn't the story of a lucky startup that caught a viral wave. It's a story of brutal competition, of billion-dollar gambles, of geopolitical chess games, and of a single revolutionary idea that was forged in the hyper-competitive furnace of the Chinese tech scene, long before the rest of the world had any idea what was coming. This is the story of a man who didn't just want to build an app, but wanted to build a new kind of reality. It's the story of an algorithm so powerful, so effective, that it has been accused of everything from creating a new generation of artists to threatening national security. This is the untold story of TikTok, and it starts not with a dance, but with a quiet, unassuming engineer who was deeply, profoundly dissatisfied with the internet. His name was Zhang Yiming, and he was about to change the world not by connecting people to their friends, but by connecting people to content they didn't even know they wanted. He was about to build an engine for desire, and in doing so, he would build an empire that would make rivals like Facebook and Google look slow, old, and out of touch. To understand the earthquake that is TikTok, you have to understand the man who created the fault line. Zhang Yiming is not your typical tech CEO. He's not a showman like Steve Jobs, nor a public figure like Mark Zuckerberg. For years, he was almost a ghost, a name whispered in tech circles, a quiet billionaire who preferred code to conversation. Born in 1983 in the southeastern coastal province of Fujian, China, Zhang was the son of civil servants. He was part of a generation that came of age with the internet, a generation that saw China transform from a technological backwater into a global powerhouse. He was, by all accounts, a bookish and solitary child. He loved computers, but he also loved literature. This combination of the technical and the humanistic would become the defining feature of his future empire. He went to Nankai University in Tianjin, where he initially majored in microelectronics but switched to software engineering. But even then, he was restless. He felt that the way people accessed information was broken. You had search engines, like Baidu in China or Google in the West, where you had to know what you were looking for. You had social networks, like RenRen in China or Facebook, where your world was limited to the people you already knew. What about everything else? What about the vast, uncharted ocean of information, creativity, and content that was out there, waiting to be discovered? Zhang saw a gap, a huge one. He believed that the future wasn't about search, and it wasn't about social. It was about discovery. It was about a system that could know you better than you knew yourself. A system that could serve you an endless stream of content, perfectly tailored to your tastes, your moods, your secret desires. After graduating, he bounced around. He was one of the first employees at a travel startup called Cooksoon. He worked at Microsoft for a short, and by his own admission, deeply unfulfilling period. He found the corporate culture stifling. He was an engineer who wanted to build, not a manager who wanted to attend meetings. So he did what so many ambitious young engineers do. He started his own company. And he failed. He started another one. It didn't quite take off. He was learning. He was iterating. He was living the classic startup life. Long hours, instant noodles, and a burning conviction that he was onto something big. The Chinese tech scene at this time was a brutal, unforgiving arena. It was often called a gladiatorial environment. Piracy was rampant. Ideas were stolen in a heartbeat. The only way to survive was to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone else. It was in this pressure cooker that Zhang's big idea began to crystallize. In 2012, in a residential apartment in Beijing, he founded ByteDance. The name itself was a clue. Byte, for technology. Dance, for the creative, human element. From day one, the mission was clear: to combine the art of content with the science of artificial intelligence. Their first major product wasn't a video app. It was a news aggregator called Toutiao, which means headlines in Chinese. On the surface, it looked like many other news apps, but underneath, it was a revolution. Toutiao had no editors, no journalists. It was a pure, unadulterated recommendation engine. It scraped news articles, videos, and content from all over the Chinese internet. When a user signed up, the app would present them with a stream of content. It would watch them. Every tap, every swipe, every pause, every comment, every share was a signal. A piece of data. The algorithm would learn. If you lingered for a few extra seconds on an article about basketball, it would show you more basketball. If you quickly swiped past celebrity gossip, it would learn to hide it. It was a machine for learning human taste. And it was terrifyingly effective. While other companies were focused on building social graphs, trying to get you to friend your cousin and your old high school teacher, ByteDance was building what they called an interest graph. They didn't care who you knew, they cared what you liked. Toutiao was a colossal success in China. It grew to hundreds of millions of users. It made ByteDance a unicorn, a billion-dollar company. But for Zhang Yiming, it was just the beginning. It was the laboratory. It was the training ground for the algorithm. He had perfected a weapon, and now he was looking for a new war to fight. He saw the rise of mobile video. He saw how smartphones were putting a camera in everyone's pocket. He knew that video was the future. In 2016, ByteDance launched a short video app in China called Douyin. It was, in essence, Toutiao for video. It took the same powerful recommendation engine and applied it to 15-second clips. The app was an instant sensation. It was a perfect storm. You had a powerful AI that could get you hooked. A suite of easy-to-use video editing tools that made everyone a creator, and a huge library of licensed music that made everything feel more epic, more emotional, more shareable. Douyin became a cultural phenomenon in China. It was a place where trends were born, where new stars were made overnight, where ordinary people could find a moment of fame. But Zhang Yiming's ambition was never limited to China. He had always said that ByteDance should be a borderless company. He wanted to build the first Chinese tech giant that was truly global. And he knew that to do that, he had to conquer the West. He had to conquer America. And that's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because while ByteDance was building its empire in the East, a very similar app was taking over the phones of teenagers in the West. It was called Musical.ly. And the collision of these two worlds would be the single most important moment in TikTok's history. It was the decision that changed everything. The stage was set for a showdown. In one corner, you had ByteDance, the Chinese behemoth, with its all-powerful algorithm and deep pockets. In the other, you had Musical.ly, the scrappy Shanghai-based startup that had somehow, against all odds, captured the hearts and minds of American and European teens. Musical.ul's story is a classic startup tale of luck, timing, and a brilliant pivot. It was founded by two old friends, Alex Zhu and Liu Yang. They had originally built an app for short-form educational videos. It was a noble idea, and it was a complete and utter failure. Nobody used it. The company was running out of money. They were on the verge of shutting down. One day, Zhu was on a train watching a group of teenagers. He noticed they were doing two things: listening to music and taking selfies. They were editing their photos, adding stickers, and sharing them with friends. A light bulb went off. What if they could combine these two behaviors? What if they could create an app that let people make their own music videos? It was a simple, powerful idea. They took the last of their money and, in a desperate, last-ditch effort, built Musical.ly in just a few weeks. The concept was genius in its simplicity. Users could pick a song from a huge library, and then record a 15-second video of themselves lip-syncing, dancing, or acting it out. The app provided tools to speed up or slow down the footage, making it easy to create cool, shareable clips. They launched in 2014. For a while, nothing happened. Then, slowly, it started to catch on. It found a niche with a young, creative audience. It was fun. It was silly. It was a new way to express yourself. By 2016, Musical.ly was a phenomenon. It was the #1 app in the App Store in dozens of countries. It had tens of millions of users, mostly in North America and Europe. They had created a new kind of social network, one based on performance and creativity. They had created a generation of musers, young stars who built massive followings on the platform. They had done what no Chinese-founded app had ever done before. They had conquered the American teen market. Back in Beijing, Zhang Yiming was watching. He saw Musical.ly's success not as a threat, but as an opportunity. He saw a company that had the one thing he didn't, a Western user base. ByteDance had the superior technology. Their recommendation algorithm was light years ahead of Musical.ly's relatively simple feed-based system. But Musical.ly had the community. They had the culture. They had the brand. Zhang Yiming could have tried to compete. He could have launched Douyin in the West and tried to build an audience from scratch. But that would have been slow. It would have been expensive. And it might not have worked. The history of tech is littered with the graves of companies that tried and failed to launch in a foreign market. So he made a decision. A bold, ruthless, and incredibly expensive decision. He decided to buy them. It was a move straight out of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. The negotiations were secret and intense. Musical.ly was a hot property. They had other suitors, including, reportedly, Facebook. But ByteDance came with an offer that was impossible to refuse. In November 2017, ByteDance announced that it was acquiring Musical.ly for a price that was reported to be close to $1 billion. At the time, it was one of the largest acquisitions of a consumer app ever. The tech world was stunned. Who was this Chinese company, ByteDance, that had come out of nowhere and spent $1 billion on a teen lip-syncing app? But for Zhang Yiming, the plan was already in motion. This wasn't just an acquisition, it was an absorption. It was a transplant. He was taking the heart of Musical.ly, its users, its creators, its culture, and putting it into the body of his own, much more powerful creation. For about a year, nothing changed. ByteDance ran Musical.ly as a separate app. They were learning. They were studying the Western user base. They were preparing for the final move. Then, in August 2018, the switch was flipped. Users of Musical.ly woke up one morning to find that the app on their phone had changed. The familiar red and white logo was gone. In its place was a new one, a sleek musical note in shades of blue, pink, and black. The name had changed, too. It was now called TikTok. It was a moment of corporate genius and brutal efficiency. In one fell swoop, ByteDance had done 3 things. First, they had instantly acquired a massive, pre-existing user base in the West. They didn't have to spend years and billions of dollars on marketing to get people to download their app. They were already on their phones. Second, they had eliminated their biggest competitor. They didn't just buy Musical.ly, they erased it. The brand, the name, the logo, all gone. All that was left was the community, which was now their community. Third, and most importantly, they had swapped out the engine. The new TikTok app looked and felt a lot like Musical.ly on the surface. But underneath, it was running on ByteDance's powerful AI recommendation engine. The For You page was now front and center. This was the masterstroke. Users who had been on Musical.ly were used to seeing content from the people they followed. Now they were being fed a perfectly curated, endlessly addictive stream of content from the entire TikTok universe. The algorithm went to work. It started learning their tastes, their quirks, their secret pleasures, and the growth was explosive. The combination of Musical.ly's creative community and ByteDance's addictive algorithm was like pouring gasoline on a fire. TikTok didn't just grow, it detonated. It became the most downloaded app in the world. It surpassed Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. It was a cultural tidal wave. Everything we think of as TikTok today, the viral trends, the overnight stars, the way it shapes music and fashion and language, was made possible by that one pivotal decision. The decision to not just compete, but to consume. To buy your way to the top, and then to replace the soul of the company you bought with your own, much more powerful, artificial one. It was a brilliant, audacious move that redrew the map of the social media world. But as TikTok's power grew, so did the questions. The very things that made it so successful, its addictive algorithm, its Chinese ownership, its vast collection of user data, were about to become its greatest liabilities. The empire had been built. But now, it was about to face a crisis that would threaten to tear it all down. For a while, TikTok was a golden child. It was the fun app, the creative app, the place you went to escape the drama and politics of Facebook and Twitter. But as it grew from a niche platform into a global cultural force, the shadows started to lengthen. The paradise had a dark side. And the world was starting to notice. The first signs of trouble came from the content itself. The sheer volume of videos being uploaded to TikTok, hundreds of millions per day, was a moderator's nightmare. And while much of it was harmless fun, a darker side began to emerge. Dangerous challenges went viral, leading to injuries and even deaths. Misinformation and conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, amplified by the powerful recommendation engine. The algorithm, so brilliant at figuring out what you wanted to see, had no moral compass. If a video was engaging, it would be pushed, regardless of whether it was true, or safe, or healthy. Reports began to surface of the immense pressure on TikTok's content moderators, who were often outsourced and underpaid, forced to watch thousands of disturbing videos a day, from graphic violence to child exploitation. The company insisted it was investing heavily in moderation, but it was like trying to empty the ocean with a thimble. Then there was the impact on the users themselves. Psychologists and parents began to raise alarms about the app's effect on the mental health of its young audience. The endless stream of perfectly beautiful people, of seemingly effortless success, was creating a new kind of social pressure. The algorithm was so good at feeding you what you liked that it could create filter bubbles of anxiety, of body dysmorphia, of eating disorders. If a user showed even a fleeting interest in sad or depressing content, the For You page could quickly become a downward spiral of despair. The app that was meant to be a source of joy was, for some, becoming a source of pain. But the biggest crisis, the one that would catapult TikTok from the tech pages to the front pages of newspapers around the world, had to do with its roots, its Chinese ownership. As TikTok's influence in the West grew, so did the suspicion. Politicians and intelligence agencies began to ask a simple but terrifying question. What was a Chinese-owned company doing with the data of hundreds of millions of Americans and Europeans? The fear was twofold. First, there was the data itself. TikTok collects a vast amount of information on its users. Not just what you watch, but where you watch it, what kind of device you're using, your age, your gender, and, through your contacts, who you know. Could this data be accessed by the Chinese government? Under China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, any Chinese company can be compelled to hand over data to the state for national security purposes. ByteDance has always sworn that it stores international user data outside of China, in places like the US and Singapore, and that it would never hand it over to the Chinese government. But the suspicion remained. For critics, the potential for espionage was too great to ignore. The second fear was even more insidious. It was the fear of censorship and propaganda. Could the Chinese government use TikTok's powerful algorithm to shape public opinion in the West? Could it subtly suppress content that was critical of Beijing, like videos about the protests in Hong Kong or the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang? Or could it amplify content that served its own geopolitical interests? Users began to run their own experiments. Some claim that videos with certain hashtags were being, quote, shadow banned, their views mysteriously suppressed. A young woman in the US went viral after she hid a critique of the Chinese government's human rights record inside a seemingly innocent makeup tutorial. TikTok vehemently denied all of it. They insisted that their content moderation policies were not influenced by any foreign government. They hired a high-profile American CEO, a former Disney executive, to run the international business. They opened transparency centers where experts could come and review their code. But the damage was done. The perception that TikTok was a potential Trojan horse for the Chinese Communist Party had taken root. The crisis came to a head in 2020. First, India, which had been one of TikTok's largest markets with over 200 million users, banned the app entirely, along with dozens of other Chinese apps, citing national security concerns. It was a massive blow, a sudden and total loss of a huge chunk of their global user base. Then, the United States government turned up the heat. The Trump administration declared TikTok a national security threat. They issued an executive order that would effectively ban the app in the US unless it was sold to an American company. What followed was a bizarre and chaotic saga of high-stakes corporate drama. For months, the fate of TikTok hung in the balance. Some of the biggest names in American tech and retail were circling, from Microsoft to Oracle to Walmart. The deal was a moving target, constantly changing shape. At one point, it seemed Microsoft would buy the whole US operation. Then, a strange partnership between Oracle and Walmart emerged, where they would take a minority stake and manage the US user data. The whole affair was a geopolitical circus. It was a clash of titans, the US versus China, Silicon Valley versus the rising power of Chinese tech. Zhang Yiming, the quiet engineer who just wanted to build a cool product, was now caught in the middle of a superpower rivalry. He was forced to navigate a minefield of politics, nationalism, and public opinion. In the end, the ban never fully came into effect. A change in the U.S. administration led to a new, more nuanced approach. The immediate threat of a sale or a ban receded. But the crisis had left a permanent scar. It had exposed the fundamental tension at the heart of TikTok's empire, the tension between its global ambition and its Chinese origins. The app had survived. It was bigger and more powerful than ever. But it was no longer just a fun app for dancing teens. It was now a symbol of a new, more fractured world, a world where the flow of information was becoming a battleground. The crisis had forced TikTok to grow up, to become more than just a tech company. It had become a political actor, a diplomatic entity, a company that had to constantly prove its loyalty and its independence. The dark side had been revealed, and it could never be fully hidden again. The question of who really controlled TikTok and what they wanted to do with its immense power was now a permanent part of its story. So what is the true legacy of this app that came out of nowhere and conquered the world? It's easy to get lost in the headlines, in the talk of bans and data and national security. But the real impact of TikTok is something much deeper, much more personal. It's about how it has fundamentally rewired our culture, our economy, and maybe even our brains. Before TikTok, the internet was a place of connections. You followed people. You built a network. Your feed was a reflection of the choices you had made. TikTok blew that model to pieces. It made the For You page the center of the universe. It was a radical shift. The internet was no longer about who you knew. It was about what the algorithm thought you should see. This had a profound effect on culture. Trends no longer spread slowly from person to person. They exploded globally in a matter of hours. A song could go from being an obscure oldie to the biggest hit in the world overnight, just because it became the soundtrack to a viral dance. A teenager in a small town could become a global superstar without ever leaving their bedroom. TikTok democratized fame. It created a new kind of celebrity, one that was more authentic, more relatable, and often more fleeting. It also changed the very nature of content. It killed the long, polished YouTube video. It killed the perfect filtered Instagram photo. It ushered in an era of short, raw, unedited chaos. It taught us to communicate in 15-second bursts, to tell stories in fragments, to live our lives in a series of jump cuts. This has had a huge impact on the creative industries. The music industry is now completely enthralled to TikTok. Record labels scout for new artists on the app. They design songs specifically to have a TikTokable moment, a catchy snippet that will inspire a trend. The film industry, the fashion industry, the publishing industry, they are all scrambling to understand and adapt to this new landscape. But the legacy of TikTok is not just about fun and creativity. It's also about power and control. The algorithm, the secret sauce that made it all possible, is a black box. We don't know how it works. We don't know why it shows us one video and not another. We are all, in a sense, subjects in a massive uncontrolled experiment in social engineering. And the results of that experiment are still coming in. Is it making us more creative or just more distracted? Is it bringing us together or is it pushing us into ever more niche filter bubbles? Is it a tool for self-expression or is it a tool for surveillance? The story of TikTok is the story of the 21st century. It's a story about globalization, about the clash of cultures, about the tension between commerce and creativity, between freedom and control. It's a story about a company that managed to build a bridge between the East and the West, only to find itself caught in the crossfire. It's a story that is still being written every day, with every swipe of a thumb. The quiet engineer who started it all, Zhang Yiming, has since stepped down as CEO of ByteDance. He said he wanted to read more books and daydream, but his creation is more powerful than ever. It is a permanent feature of our digital lives, a ghost in the machine that is constantly watching, learning, and deciding what we see next. It has changed the way we listen to music, the way we talk, the way we laugh, the way we think. It has held up a mirror to our society, and what we see is often strange, sometimes beautiful, and occasionally terrifying. So as we stand here, with this algorithmic ghost in our pocket, we have to ask, did Zhang Yiming give us the ultimate tool for self-expression, or did he just build the world's most beautiful cage? You tell me.